address the idea of India studies in a more holistic way, including through a long-term sustained partnership that makes these works available. I know there will be ideas and suggestions that will emanate after this event, and I'm very certain that we would be interested in further conversations on how we can work with OCHS, and indeed any other partners who may be interested in bringing out other aspects of the long tradition of India's philosophical, cultural, multiple religious and spiritual roots. I believe today, as the India-UK relationship is poised for a new momentum, I think there is an opportunity for us to leverage studies such as this to contribute to a better understanding of our past, for a better and more relevant understanding of a better shared present and future for India and the UK. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for coming up here all the way, particularly those of you who've made the effort to come from Oxford on this Friday afternoon. And we look forward to the proceedings of your event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner, for coming and for those very thoughtful words to open up the session. My name is Pratik Dattani. I've been working with the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies for a little bit of time. I got inspired by, like many others in the room, by Shaunika ji. About 11 years ago, I did a course at Oxford one weekend when I was part of the City Hindus network. I think about 25 of us made the trip to Oxford, and Shaunika left a wonderful, lasting expression, and kept that. He's kept that interest alive in Hinduism in the UK amongst the British Indian community, but then also much more widely outside the borders of the UK. Most of you are familiar with the OCHS, but for some of the new faces that I see in the audience, the OCHS is the leading center for Hindu studies around the world. It's one of 3 religious studies centers that are at Oxford. There's one for Hebrew and Jewish studies, Islamic studies, and then Hindu studies. One wonderful self-deprecating joke I heard from Shaunika last time I was there about the center is it's right in the middle of town, and it's above a burger restaurant called Five Guys. So he said it's OCHS sits above the 5 Pandavas. And I think that encapsulates not only Shaunika's personality, but the way the OCHS has operated for the last 2 decades. That while it's the leading such center in the world of its kind, there's a lot of humility, there's a lot of thought, and there's a lot of ability to strike subtle conversations about differences within Hinduism, as well as engaging students and scholars from around the world who are not just studying Hinduism, but other related topics as well. So very glad all of you are here with us today. Tanya is our star of the show today. She's hosting the event. So back to you.
Thank you for that, Pratik. So next up, I would like to invite Lucian Wong to the stage. Lucian is a research fellow at the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, and he's also the series editor of the book series.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Tanya, and for making all of this possible today. Also, thank you very much for those very interesting words, Your Excellency, and to Pratik for valiantly stepping in for Shaunika today, who came sick this morning, and I know he's very disappointed that he can't make it, but we proceed nonetheless. So, my name is Dr. Lucian Wong, Fellow of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, as you just heard, and as General Editor of the book series being launched today, it's a great honor to be tasked with providing you with some basic context for this event, the background, rationale, and guiding vision of this book series, the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies Mandala Publishing Series. Now, as with any story of origins, there are no doubt numerous ways to narrate the genesis of this series. However, it seemed to me the most intuitive to begin at what is perhaps its most concrete and experiential source of impetus, an experience that has quite possibly been shared, likely more than once, by many gathered in this room today, in the course of browsing the shelves of bookshops in the UK and other regions across the globe. If you haven't already guessed, I'm alluding here to the striking dearth of titles on display one almost invariably encounters in the Hinduism sections of the world's bookstores, whether large or small. To take a personal and rather telling example from close to home, Blackwell's in Oxford is a well-known wonderland of books of all varieties. As it advertises itself, it is in fact the largest specialist booksellers in the UK. Yet as Hinduism enthusiasts who frequent this otherwise abundantly stocked veritable city of books know only too well, the store often carries little more than a single shelf, if that, of Hinduism-related titles. And this paucity of selection is only magnified when viewed in the context of the adjacent stock of titles pertaining to other world religions. For example, entire bays of shelves devoted to Buddhism and Islam-related titles, and rows of bays dedicated to books on Christianity. Now, lest I be misunderstood, I certainly don't mean to be pointing fingers at Oxford's Blackwells. Indeed, from personal experience, the store appears to be performing quite a lot better on this front than many others in the UK and elsewhere. I'm simply wanting to underscore what cannot but strike one as something of a curious incongruity. For not only is the phenomenon of Hinduism's relative absence in these bookshops' contexts incongruous with the tradition's profound, millennia-old contribution to global religious history, as well as with its undeniable prominence throughout the transnational religious landscape of the present, it is also starkly at odds with a well-established tradition in recent centuries of academic engagement with Hinduism's rich plethora of religious currents, philosophies, and ritual practices, which only continues to flourish in manifold forms in the modern global academy. Now, one could no doubt point to a host of factors at play here. Amazon's ever-encroaching online hegemony over global book markets, context-specific religious demographics, or even colonially inflected asymmetries in global knowledge production and consumption, to name just a few. To whatever degree such factors may be at work, however, it is the conviction of those involved in the creation of this particular book series that the phenomenon of absence I'm highlighting rests as much on a dearth of a certain kind of literature for which a large section of any potential Hinduism-related book readership remains most in want. I refer here to books that deftly bridge the divide between academic and popular writing by preserving and utilizing the best elements of both. Books that fill the gulf between insider treatises directed toward a specific community of followers on the one hand, and works of academic scholarship on the tradition that, in spite of their many virtues, often remain couched in modalities and jargon largely inaccessible to the uninitiated. Books, that is to say, that are pitched just right so as to suitably populate the desolate shelves of the Hinduism sections of bookstores the world over. It is in aspiring to fill this evident lacuna in the Hinduism book market that the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies Mandala Publishing Series was forged. The OCHS, I would suggest, is in many ways uniquely situated to undertake such a task. On the one hand, the Centre is the premier research institute, as we just heard, for Hindu studies in the world. Since its inception over 25 years ago, the Centre has attracted a continual stream of world-class scholars, spearheaded numerous groundbreaking research programs and projects, and opened up the field of Hindu studies for an international audience. The Centre continues to pioneer new, multidisciplinary approaches to Hindu studies, always held to the highest standards of academic integrity and excellence, that seek to cultivate a discourse between Indian and Western traditions of scholarship as peers. On the other hand, and as a natural consequence perhaps of its defining ethos, the Centre has also long been involved in public engagement and community outreach. As our director, Shaunakaji, once elegantly put it to me, the Centre remains ever attentive of the need of putting the, quote, academically minded to earthly use. To this end, then, the Centre initiated a continuing education programme over 20 years ago as a response to requests from various individuals and societies within the British Hindu community who sought to broaden and deepen their understanding of their traditions. While this program was migrated to the online context over a decade ago and radically expanded to meet the demands of a global audience of students that now number in the tens of thousands, these online courses have endeavored to replicate the richness and spirit of the face-to-face discussions in which they were born, with the aim of recreating the idea of a sangha in which participants can express their own ideas and personal insights. So the OCHS Mandala Publishing Series is thus perhaps best characterized as an encapsulation of these two poles of the Centre's core identity. One representing the highest levels of pioneering research, the other the skillful dissemination of this research well beyond the ivory towers of academia, embodying their intimate interrelationship. This was, in any case, Shaunakaji's inceptive vision. Bringing this vision to fruition was a task that he set for me and my fellow editorial board members, namely Professor John Brockington, Dr. Avni Chagh, Dr. James Medeo, and Dr. Valters Negreeves. Together, we have sought to curate a book series that offers authoritative yet accessible introductions to the gamut of subjects on offer in the domain of Hindu studies. The aim of each book in the series being to present its subject that is engaging and readily comprehensible to persons of all backgrounds, academic or otherwise, without compromising scholarly rigor. The result of our labors are the three books that you see before you today, namely Women in the Hindu World by eminent Sanskrit scholar Professor Mandakranta Bose, which takes us on a riveting journey from the earliest stages of Hindu society to the present, marking through time the evolving religious roles and social status of Hindu women. The Hindu Temple and its Sacred Landscape by renowned Indian historian and archaeologist Professor Himanshu Prabharai, which explores Hinduism as it was practiced in temples across the Indian subcontinent throughout history, highlighting the temple's significance as a marker of cultural identity. And the Bhagavad Gita, a new translation and study guide by Dr. Nicholas Sutton, chief architect of the OCHS's continuing education program, who in a lucid chapter-by-chapter analysis sets out a guide to the philosophy, religious context, and contemporary significance of the Bhagavad Gita. In addition to these, there are a number of others to be released a little later this year or early next year by similarly qualified experts in the realms of modern Hinduism, the Yoga Sutras, the Mahabharata, Hindu ecology, Vaishnavism, Hindu Tantra, modern yoga and its roots in the Sanskrit language. All of these with the same goal, very much in consonance with that of the High Commission and the Nehru Center, of making accessible Hindu culture to or Hindu studies scholarship to a more general audience. It's been an extremely exciting opportunity to partner with Mandala Publishing, an imprint of Insight Editions, which has a strong and well-established reputation as a specialist trade publisher in the field of Hinduism and other Eastern religions, and who has an excellent production department, design team, and a very strong distribution networks across the world, most notably through Simon & Schuster. So looking forward, and Shaunaka wanted me to mention this today specifically, the next phase of this, we look toward the South Asian context, where we hope these books will also find a wide readership, possibly even in translation, for example, into Hindi, providing the Indian context with authoritative yet accessible and always engaging introductions to the gamut of subjects on offer in Hindu studies. So this leads me then to, are you going to introduce the other? Okay, yeah, I'll leave it to you then. Yeah, Tanya. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lucian Wong, for that very inspiring introduction to the series, and thank you for all the amazing work you've been doing as editor for the series. We have now come to the discussions of the books, and first up will be Women in the Hindu World by Professor Mandakranta Bose. I would like to invite Laura Anderson to the stage. Laura is a graduate of Oxford University and LSE London, and of the OCSS as well. And she is manager of our Kathmandu Summer University course and has done research on women and samskaras in Kathmandu. Laura, please come to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. I am pleased to be introducing one of my academic heroes, a global leader in Sanskrit studies and religious studies. She is fellow of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. She is a professor at the Institute for Asian Research at the University of British Columbia in Canada, where I'm also from. She studied Sanskrit and Hindu religions texts in Calcutta, comparative literature in Vancouver, and holds a doctorate from Oxford in textual studies and the classical performing arts of India. Mandakranta is the editor of the Ramayana Revisited and Faces of the Feminine in Ancient, Medieval, and Modern India. She has taught on the Natya Shastras, the Dharma Shastras, and Hinduism and women's studies. She is currently finishing a new book on top of this one that's just been published, reconstructing a Sanskrit piece of literature on musicology from the 2nd century. She has published this book we'll be discussing today, Women in the Hindu World. The book explores so many wonderful topics. The idealization of the goddess, how this manifests in practice with real women. She takes on the challenge of analyzing the abstract spiritual foundations of religion in conjunction with the real concrete iterations of this in worldly life. She explores textual histories, the Rig Veda's disdain towards women, and learned women's active participation and self-expression in the philosophical community of the ancient Hindu world. She discusses the erosion of women's freedom to pursue knowledge with the advent of the Dharma Shastras, imposing hierarchies of gender and caste. She then explores histories of women's active participation in religious rituals and their responsibility to uphold religious traditions in the home. She articulates crucially the importance of women's artistic contributions, dance, song, poetry. Such gorgeous art is explored in this book. She further explores how Hindu women today interact with the old dictates of Dharma and how Hinduism has accommodated modernity and liberalism. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage Professor Mandakranta Bose. Right. This working?
Namaskar.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Professor Bose. It's truly an honor. I first have to ask you, why did you write this book?
First of all, I would like to say thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure. And I'm saying it in Sanskrit, Anugrahitasmi. Thank you. Why I started thinking about writing this book is that as I was growing up, I found no univocal voice in our society, in my study. I'm a Sanskritist. I started studying Sanskrit, and I found contradictory voices. In the Rig Veda, you find Srinam Ashasyang Manaha. Shalabrikanam Hridayani Eta, which means they are like hyena and they can't be taught. They're useless. Yet, in the same Rig Veda even, you find in the Vedic period at least 28 Brahmavadinis, that means well-educated women. You also find Grihavadhu, who are housewives. You go to Manusmriti, you find again women are pujarha, they are to be worshipped. They are like lights in a household, grihadiptaya. So that made me wonder what's happening, so much contradiction. And I thought of probing into finding the contradictory voices and try to make a sense. And that's what prompted me.
Thank you, and I do believe that you explore lots of different kinds of voices through history in this book, so mission accomplished. My next question for you is, in Hinduism, goddesses are modeled on human beings, as you say in the book. They are potent and ready models for idealizing human women. Women simultaneously are cast in the goddess mold, which facilitates labeling women in their social relations. So, can you explore with us what the relationship between notions of divine goddess and mortal women are?
Women are reflection of goddesses or idealized goddesses. That's how they are idealized. Similarly, you try to find in women a reflection of goddess. Ya Devi Sarva Bhutena Matri Rupena Samsthita. Devi is like a mother, nurturer. You see, try to see that in a woman. So it kind of complements each other. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
It's like Devi is looked as Shanti Rupena Samsthita, Shakti Rupena Samsthita. Everything that you can visualize, you want to find in goddess.
So as a follow-up to that, how does this benevolence of Mahadevi translate into expectations or the experiences of mortal women?
Have you seen Devi, the film that Satyajit Ray filmed? In that, if you go deep into that, you will find that we want to, or that author wanted to see the reflection of goddess in there. So that woman became goddess, and as if she has the power of a goddess to bring back life to a dead child. That's the story, right? And I think the earlier question and this one complements each other. Goddess is visualized as somebody or some being, spiritual being, which can be reflected upon women, and women are modeled in that kind of thing. Matri Rupena, nurturer, that's the main, protector, and that's how you see goddess. And you want to see in women, Hindu women, that's how they are kind of visualized, thought of, idealized.
Thank you so much for that. In your book, you present Trayambak Yajvan's cast iron scheme of life for a woman, confining her to tasks in the home. This, in practice, leaves her little time to educate herself, to think critically, to gain new skills. We see examples of women sages escaping this fear of limitation by renouncing householder life altogether. Can women find liberation and quench their thirst for knowledge within this householder life? And if so, how?
Okay. There are several aspects of this question. First of all, Trambakya Yuan is from the South India, who wrote a Stri Dharma Paddhati in around 17th century. He was the worst writer on women. He was so restrictive of women's movement and all sorts of rules. It's unbelievable. Through the ages, we have never come across anything like that. And in the South, at one point, that book was followed by various groups of people, mostly Brahmins, and women really suffered. Fortunately, in our history, though there are contradictions, not another person like Trambakya Yuan ever born or ever wrote anything. There are pockets of, periods of time, like, the Sati event, appalling. But we heard voices that prevented it, and eventually it was prevented. There are always voices that we have heard. Brihaspati says, the same way a daughter and a son is born, why make a difference? In Narada Smriti, and these are all before, say around between 4th and 12th, 13th century, Narada Smriti says, every 10 years, we should sit down and look at the society and the need of the society and change the rules. What was useful at 2nd century cannot be useful at around 10th century. Things change. So that should be done. What happened to Trambakya Yuan? Nothing. He was in his own little whatever and created this awful book. But that's not really a common thing in India. There are people who are very conservative, but no one like Trambakya Yuan, thank heavens. Does that answer to your?
It does, yes. I have a follow-up from that, actually. So, yeah, from that atrocious piece of literature, you then go on to explore devotional practices in the home, how women are leaders of the ritual space in the house. What do these ritual practices do for women's religion? Because they are householders. They have not renounced all worldly possessions, and they have not renounced family life, and yet they are still finding leadership and independence in religious traditions. So can you maybe explain a little bit, what this ritual responsibility does for them?
Sure. Before I talk about rituals, I must also mention, mustn't forget, the women poets and singers from a very, very long time ago. Antal from the south, Mahadevi Akka, Lalla from Kashmir, Akka from Karnataka, Meera from the north. All these women, they were liberated. Liberation there comes from within. They came from a very regular household where there were lots of rules and regulations. And we'll come to talk about that when you talk about Sita and Radha. So, but these people just found liberation. These women, they just dedicated their lives to the gods that they have chosen. And as we know, in our Hindu society, we have 330 million gods. So you can choose, you have so much option. You cannot bound the idea of God in one vigraha, in one statue, in one thing. You have so much option. But the idea is one. And that's what Meera, Akka, they found in their own gods. One chose Krishna, one chose Shiva, one chose, Antal chose Vishnu, and so on and so forth. But when we look at later period, even in the past, Gobi Lagija Sutra gives us, women are doing the rituals, which are, we know later on, when some of the orthodox values among the Brahmin restricted any kind of rituals for women, that gradually people have come out of that, fortunately, in most cases. Although nothing, as I say, that nothing is univocal. There are various contradictory versions of this. But women, when they do something in their household, the rituals, and even in bigger celebrations, larger celebrations, they find peace, they find spirituality, they imagination, emotion, and that's how they connect. And that's how they find peace. And that's the major households. Those are the people of major household we find. But there are always some exceptions.
Yes, speaking of Sita and Radha, as you mentioned, you talk about these two figures in your book, and you say that Sita is modeled. She's a little bit closer to women's lived experience, and Radha is still respected, but kept a little bit more at a distance. Can you explore how they are complementary aspects of femininity, and how they link to socially defined women?
As I started saying that contradiction is part of our existence almost, but we find meaning of our life through these contradictions. Sita falls into the ideal womanhood in our society, or any society for that matter, who is devoted to her husband, and whatever is good for her husband, she will do it. And she has, she goes through fire ordeal and everything. Perhaps most of you who are here know about the Ramayana story in a gist. So Sita had suffered, but mind you, Rama also suffered. Anyway, Sita's suffering was unbelievable, there is no question, yet Sita was totally devoted to her husband, never, well, I shouldn't say never questioned. In the Valmiki Ramayana, she did question many times that, but that's a different controversy. Later on, Ramayana had, in Tulsi, in Kirtivas, later Ramayanas, there are 300 Ramayanas, by the way. So, various versions, but Sita suffered and suffered patiently. So Sita is a model for a woman, for a wife, and there is no question about that. Yet, very few, at least I come from Bengal, I'm a Bengali. In Bengal, very few people will name their daughter Sita. Why? Because she went through so much pain and suffering. That's why. But she is a model wife. Whereas Radha breaks all the rules. She is married to a person with whom she doesn't live. She falls in love with Krishna. She goes out and meets with Krishna. She loves Krishna. It's a no-no thing in a society. Yet, Radha is loved. People is devoted to her. Why? Because her love is all-encompassing love, where she breaks all the rules in a society. It's beyond, it's over and above human society. If you can give up everything, even your society's expectations, you feel something here and go beyond the society's rules. That's also something very, very desirable. And so, as I said, that you can choose your own vigraha, own idol, own God. And nobody will question, why did you choose Sita or why did you choose Radha? The way you want to love God, you can do it. And the contradiction goes further. Like, we grew up with a verse, Ahalya, Draupadi, Kunti, Tara, Mandodari, Tatha, Panchakanyang Smaren Nityam, Mahapapa Vinashanam. 5 names, if you think of them every day, all your sins will be wiped out. Who are these 5 characters? Ahalya, who was seduced by Indra, the king of God, and deviated and was cursed. Kunti had her 5 sons not by marital relation. Draupadi had 5 husbands. Tara had 2 husbands. Mandodari suffered in hands of Ravana. Yet these 5 names are very precious in Hindu thoughts. What more contradiction you can get? So that's why, you cannot make one statement. There are so many ways of looking at it. And in their own ways, all these 5 women loved their husbands, loved their family, and did whatever was expected of them in the society. So there are varieties.
Thank you for that answer. I think it's brilliant how you articulate the special and particular acceptance of multiple different kinds of women and devotion through history. I'm now going to ask you a bit of a political question. I think what your book does for a broader audience is articulate a different kind of history through South Asian traditions and religion than different cultures. You dive deep into what is particular about Hindu women through time. A lot of women's rights movements, feminist movements we see today are often Eurocentric. What is the difference between Hindu women's liberation and these Eurocentric ideas of liberation that often unfairly dominate discourse around gender studies?
That's a good one. What I feel is that scholarship gives you the ammunition, the ideas, understanding. You know what's happening, what's happened. You have the proper understanding. Scholarship is, of course, very much necessary. Without that, you cannot progress. Why I have learned so much? Because I read from my childhood. I loved reading. I read. I had questions. If I couldn't find it, I would ask. Okay. And the feminist movement, I have taught women's studies for 20 years. And in Canada, I live in Canada. I've been there for 50 years. So I have experienced what it is. The movement of feminism, feminist studies, you name it. What they lack, the Eurocentric feminist scholarship, is reflection, imagination, emotion, not everything can be explained through magically finding facts and magically trying to explore them. Not everything can be achieved without understanding. Understanding more than just reading a book, getting some facts. It's more than that. And that's why within the religious system of Indian lives, even then women can find liberation. This idea of liberation. And I have many, many good friends in the States, in America here. This idea doesn't come through in their scholarships. They're great scholars. And the ability to analyze is superb. But if they just add a little more of imagination, emotion, and reflection, perhaps we'll be richer.
That was a gorgeous answer. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. That was the final question for today. Unfortunately, we're out of time. A question that sits with me when studying Hinduism is, how can a belief system that declares the feminine as the epicenter of energy and existence also perpetuate gendered hierarchies and women's subservience? It is puzzling how religious interpretation has enabled injustice to become institutionalized. I think the most heartbreaking sentiment about Professor Bose's book for me was when women believed in their own disempowerment. They themselves perpetuated these interpretations and traditions. The key to oppression is evidently making disempowerment desirable, creating a self-sustaining cycle of control, fueled with this mutually accepted interpretation. Yet, I think what Professor Bose has articulated in this book and today is that the way towards liberation lies within the resources of Hinduism itself. Akka Mahadevi is a great example of unlocking freedom and social mobility through intense devotion. Hindu women's liberation, I think what Professor Bose has really well explained today, is not about turning away from religion, but in fact leaning into it. She rightly points out that at its conceptual core, Hinduism is a women-centered ideology. With this has come a history of women's philosophical, ritual, artistic, and devotional practices, which has given tremendous opportunities to women for their liberation, their freedom, and their joy. In the 20th century, we have seen political movements towards women's democratic participation, movements for equitable education that have actually utilized the language and logic of ancient religion to validate its legitimacy. And I think this is an exciting and critical moment for the future of women's lived experiences of Hinduism. I would like to leave you all today with some questions to ponder to yourself. I would warmly invite you to reflect after this talk. What is the connection between Hindu women's social life and self-determination? And finally, what conditions can create a future of Hindu women's full participation, imaginative creation, and agency? How can you contribute to enabling this future in your own work? Thank you very much. Please, everyone, thank Professor Bose once more. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Laura Anderson and Professor Manda Krantz-Bose, for this very inspiring talk on women in the Hindu world that definitely made me think more broadly about women's role. We will now proceed with our second book discussion on Tantric Knowledge by Professor Gavin Flood. So I'd like to invite Shavi Maheshwari to the stage. Shavi is a DPhil student at Oxford University and the OCHS. She's doing research on Hinduism, Tantric Hinduism in Nepal. Shavi, please come to the stage.
Hello. Sorry, short people problems. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sharvi Maheshwari, and I'm a DPhil student at the University of Oxford. So today I'm going to be talking to Professor Gavin Flood, who inspired me to be here at the first place. Coming from a tiny town in Uttar Pradesh, I grew up reading his work. So Gavin is a professor of Hindu studies and comparative religion in theology and the religion faculty, and academic director of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. Gavin read religious studies and social anthropology at Lancaster University, taught at the universities of Wales and Stirling before coming to Oxford. He was elected to membership of the British Academy in 2014. His research interests are in medieval Hindu texts, especially from the traditions of Shaiva texts, comparative religion and phenomenology. It's a great honor for me to be inviting him to stage because now, after looking up to him for so many years, I get to annoy him and my other supervisor, Dr. Bjarne Wernicke Olsen, with emails every week about all the ideas I have. So, Professor Gavin Flood.
Thank you, Sharvi, for a wonderful introduction. She kindly reminded me that I've been employed as an academic for over half a century, which is a scary thought.
I thought that was a really nice moment. I mean, to be reminded that, you've been studying a subject so closely for so long that we still discuss these things, and your students come to you and you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea.
Is that all he knows after 50 years? But that's the thing with Hinduism. You always think there's always so much more. With any civilization, I suppose that's true, but particularly with India.
Yes, please don't mind us. We are kind of in a tutorial situation now, all over again. So, Professor, I read your book, and it was not only a very easy read, but it was something that I thought I could just share with my parents, because coming from a very traditional Hindu background, Tantra is always a very interesting question. Like, I remember the first time I was telling my parents, like, guys, I'm going to be studying Tantra now, and I think we've decided, like, this is what it's going to happen. And my mom just went like, oh my God, are you going to do drugs? Do your professors do drugs? Is it black magic? And I'm like, Mom, I don't know, but none of that is going to happen, rest assured. So that would be my first question. Why do you believe Tantra has garnered such ill repute in contemporary discourse?
That's a good question. Well, the simple answer is that it's, if you Google Tantra, it's just ways of how to make your love life better, sort of thing. But going back to actually to what Pratik was saying also, His Excellency was saying about the notion of civilization, that's what interests me. What is it? What's the nature of a civilization? So I've actually referred to the idea of tantric civilization in that book because from about the 7th to the 13th century, you had what I would call a tantric civilization, by which, what is a civilization? A civilization is something that's more than a society, and it's more than a culture as well, and it's something sustained over a long, long period of time, which is linked to polity. There's a political dimension to it, and an aesthetic and cultural dimension, and we've got all these wonderful temples, particularly in South India, which I would be happy to call tantric temples, like Chidambaram, Gangai, Kondacholapuram, all these wonderful places that were built by the Chola kings and so on. So, sorry, I'm not really answering your question. So I think the answer to that question is tied up in history, I think. I think with the rise of the Delhi Sultanate in the 13th century or so, you got a decline of what I would call the Tantric kingdoms, and then it goes kind of underground. There's always an antinomian dimension to it, but that gets exaggerated and developed. And until you've got now, how to make your love life better, Tantrism is reduced to that.
In your view, what is the most compelling aspect of Tantric philosophy and practice?
Well, I don't know if it's compelling. I'm not that interested in what's personally compelling, but what is important, I think, is that Tantrism, as in within the history of Indian civilization, I suppose as European civilizations, as Chinese civilizations, as Mexican civilizations, they've been driven by fundamentally human questions. What is it to be a human being? Who are we? How can we live together? What is it to lead a good life? What is it to live a good life? And I think Tantric civilization is within that frame, if you like. It's asking these fundamental questions about who we are, where we're going, how can we live together, what is it to lead a good life, and trying to break the boundaries of what went before. So Tantrism historically comes out of what we call the Atimarga, the higher path or the outer path, which was a group of ascetics who were saying, well, the Vedic tradition is not good enough for us. We need new answers to the questions. And so it called itself the outer or the higher path. And Tantrism comes out of that. So it's, if you like, it's trying to push the boundaries of what it is to be a human being and what it is to be in a human community. And I think it did that fairly successfully, and it lasted till the 13th century, and it's still with us today, of course. So what was your question again? Sorry.
What is the most interesting aspect or most important aspect of the Tantric philosophy and the tradition?
I think it's that it tries to go beyond, tries to push beyond what was there before. And part of the cultic mechanisms of Tantra are lots of skulls and the Kapalikas, who we've all heard of, the skull-bearing ascetics, drinking out of skull bowls and all this. That my friend Bjarne Wernicke Olsen has studied some of these characters. Now, what is all that about? And I think it's about confronting death, partly. It's a recognition of human frailty, of the fact that we live and die, and to understand God, if you like, you have to understand death, and you have to kind of go beyond death. So my old teacher, John Bowker, used to ask a question, which you have to think about, but it's what are the constraints that control an event into its particularity? It's a wonderful question. What are the constraints that control an event into its particularity? Which is not a question about causes, it's a question about limits or constraints. So the constraints of this situation here, where we are now in this room, in the Nehru Center, was a whole history of the Nehru Center, but there's also the history of each one of us that brought us here today to this particular instance. So that question, what are the constraints? I think Tantrism throws up answers to that question, what are the constraints that control the human being into what they are, and it has a whole cosmology of constraints that tries to explain who we are and what we can do about our situation, because it says we're stuck in this cycle of rebirth and suffering, and we can liberate ourselves, we can become liberated from that and reach a higher truth.
Well, now that we're into it, would you want to talk about the idea of sacrifice and how it connects the Tantric traditions with Bhagavad Gita?
What a question. Yeah, well, I don't know if I can do the second bit, but I can do the first bit. Every year we take students to Nepal, the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. We have a summer school in Nepal, and we take about 20 students from Oxford and from Aarhus as well there. And it's, well, Sharvi, you've been on it.
Yes.
And it's eye-opening for so many students, because here we've got really lived Hinduism, and it's sacrificial. And this is so striking. I mean, sacrificial Hinduism is normative Hinduism in Kathmandu. And also I've done work in Kerala, where you've also have sacrificial Hinduism. And in Bali, I've never been to Bali, but the word Bali means sacrifice. I was wondering if that was true. I asked a couple of people. One person disagreed. It's from Berlin. It's a person. But the other person thought it was probably the case. So on the fringes of the Hindu cosmopolis, if you like, you've got sacrifice still being practiced: Nepal, Kerala, and Bali. And I'm thinking that they preserve an older tradition which became eroded in the sort of the Punjab, Delhi, that kind of region. So I've got a hypothesis. It might not be true, but the hypothesis is that sacrifice, which was practiced in the Vedas, carries on right through to the 13th century, and that the tantric kingdoms were also sacrificial, with sacrificial kingdoms as well. And that with the rise of the Delhi Sultanate and the destruction of the tantric kingdoms, although Vijayanagara still carries on, but that was a tantric kingdom as well, and Nepal carries on, which was a tantric kingdom until 2008. With that destruction, tantrism goes underground, and you get the rise of a more individualistic kind of religion, which was focused on purity, on vegetarianism, and bhakti and devotion. So that's a general hypothesis. So, now how does that relate to the Bhagavad Gita? Well, the Bhagavad Gita is fundamentally uses the metaphor of sacrifice as key. And I think that this is, I don't know if it's the essence, I wouldn't like to say that, but it is a key theme in the history of Indian civilization, that you've got real sacrifice practiced in the ancient Vedas, which gets transformed in the Upanishads. No, the real sacrifice is the inner sacrifice, the sacrifice of the self to the greater self. And it gets developed in the Bhagavad Gita. So devotion to God is the sacrifice of the self to a greater power.
I think that answers the question pretty well. Thank you so much, Professor. My next question, which might be a bit difficult as well, is how do tantric traditions address issues of caste and gender?
I think you've got two answers to that. One is that the more conservative traditions, which were aligned with the Vedas, the Shaiva Siddhanta and so on, still affirm Varnashrama Dharma, that your duty to your stage of life and your place in the society. They still affirm that. Some traditions said, tantric initiation eradicates caste because there's only pure consciousness anyway, and we're all one, as it were. So if you've got that kind of philosophy, then that undermines the traditional social boundaries. So I think both, it undermines caste, and it also, some tantric traditions reinforced it.
Okay. My next question would be, and this is about the book, the production of the book, which is, how does this book distinguish itself from previous works?
My previous works?
Yes.
Well, I hope it's more readable than other books that I've written, and I hope it flies off the shelves. So I think that's the difference. I hope more than one person or two people read it.
You'll definitely have more than that.
So I've written a book which I hope it's readable, and I hope people find it interesting.
Were tantric traditions and the texts also developed in languages other than Sanskrit?
That's a very good question. To my knowledge, only the tantras themselves are only in Sanskrit, but there are commentaries on those Sanskrit texts. So in Malayalam, for example, you've got the Malayalam commentaries on the Tantra Samuchaya and the Ishana Shiva Gurudeva Padati. You've got Malayalam commentaries on that I know about, but I don't think you've got tantras written in those languages, but I would be open to correction on that if one is discovered. But to my knowledge, that is not the case. Why is that? And that's because Sanskrit is a sacred language, and they're trying to preserve the sacrality of the revelation.
And do you think that the tantric temples are still relevant now?
Well, they're wonderful places, and I think they are. But they get divorced from the notion of Tantra, but I think originally they were like Chidambaram, the wonderful place at Chidambaram. I don't know if any of you have been there, but that was a classic tantric temple because the Shaiva Siddhanta was the main philosophical tradition there. And you've got these wonderful philosophers writing, not Bojadeva, but Agora Shivacharya, writing all these commentaries on tantric texts, which had then gone into Tamil. You get Tamil translations of this material, and also Tamil Bhakti verses become incorporated into the tantric tradition. So Chidambaram is a wonderful example of a living tantric temple now. Guruvayur in Kerala.
Well, that reminds me of this one more question, which is, why do you think Shaiva Shakta traditions receive more patronage than the Vaishnava tantric traditions?
That's a very good question. I think it's because these new Shaiva traditions offered kings. We must remember this is a very ancient, very, very long time ago. So people are living within a kind of magical cosmos. I don't mean that negatively, but everywhere did before the rise of science, as it were. And you've got. They thought that you could gain protection of the kingdom through adopting these tantric traditions and the mantras of protection they provided, and also the destruction of enemies. Could be achieved that way. So that's what attracted the kings, like Shankaravarman in Kashmir and these others, to those traditions. And I think that's why and also the tantric tradition says, you don't have to do much. All you have to do is get initiated. So the kings just had to get initiated, pay the money, get initiation, and then they didn't have to do anything else. Like women and the mentally backward as well. Those three classes were regarded as all they needed was initiation. So that's interesting.
Do you think that there's a difference of perspective regarding Tantra between, say, people who are not naturally initiated into the tradition and people like Indians who've just grown up in that setting, living